the summer of 1941, Nazi Germany launched its infamous invasion of the Soviet Union, known as Operation Barbarossa. This massive assault was ultimately a catastrophic failure that became a major turning point, leading to Hitler's downfall. But what if Hitler had successfully invaded the Soviet Union? In the summer of 1941, Nazi Germany launched its infamous invasion of the Soviet Union with Operation Barbarossa, a massive assault along a 2,900 kilometers front with over 3 million Axis troops. Hitler's forces made staggering advances that first year, capturing major cities like Sevastopol and threatening Moscow itself. However, the ill-prepared German army was ill-equipped to handle the brutal Russian winter. Logistics became overstretched, and the Soviet Red Army's dogged resistance led to enormous casualties on both sides at places like Stalingrad. Barbarossa ultimately stalled and failed to deliver the knockout blow to the Soviet Union that Hitler had anticipated, becoming a catastrophic failure that led to Nazi Germany's eventual downfall. But what if things had gone the other way from the very start of Barbarossa? What if meticulous planning, harsher winter conditions favoring the Germans, and the successful decapitation of the Soviet leadership early on had allowed Hitler's forces to achieve total victory in Russia by 1942? With the vast territories, resources and industries of the Soviet Union under their control, the Wehrmacht could pull back from the Eastern Front and prepare to concentrate their full might against the remaining Allied powers in the West. Deprived of the Russians as a pivotal ally tying down so many Nazi forces, how might the tide of World War II have turned? Instead of defeat at Stalingrad, with key dominoes falling for Germany, a scenario where Hitler can force an armistice or even a conditional surrender from the Soviet Union could have emerged. With the defeat and occupation of the Soviet Union by 1942–43, Germany would gain access to a wealth of strategic benefits. Oil reserves from the Caucasus regions could fuel the war machine indefinitely. The vast agricultural production from fertile Ukrainian territories would feed the entire Reich. Virtually unlimited manpower and the full force of Russian industry, churning out planes, tanks and munitions, would be under Nazi control. Most crucially, Germany would no longer need to divert forces to defend the Eastern Front. This massive influx of fuel, food, soldiers and manufacturing capabilities could have proven decisive in allowing Germany to finally force a surrender from Britain after the Blitz and Bomber Command's relentless raids. Without Russia tying down so many Nazi forces, the long-contemplated invasion of Britain through Operation Sea Lion may have become a reality. Alternatively, Germany could concentrate the bulk of its forces in fortifying Western Europe with the impregnable Atlantic wall defences against any Allied invasion attempt. Air superiority over the English Channel could ground the Allied air forces, leaving D-Day invasions extremely vulnerable to being hurled back into the sea by Germany's juggernaut. Even if an Allied foothold was miraculously established in France without the Russian front to split Hitler's armies, they could mass overwhelmingly against American and British forces trying to break out from the Norman beaches. The overwhelming imbalance of men and material may force the Allies into suing for a conditional peace, allowing Germany to keep its territorial gains in the east. With resources no longer sapped by the doomed Russian campaign, Germany's nuclear program under the brilliant scientists like Heisenberg may have progressed faster and beaten the American Manhattan Project to the first atomic bomb. This could potentially lead to atomic bombings of British cities to force surrender, or nuclear strikes against American beachheads in Europe in a bitter final gambit, an outcome too horrific to imagine. In this nightmarish scenario, Hitler and the Nazis could solidify an empire stretching from the Atlantic coast to the Urals, with only the British Empire and pockets of Allied resistance opposing it on the margins. The genocidal general plan against Jews could be enacted with impunity in the East, with mass genocide, expulsions and enslavement of Slavic peoples by the millions to make way for ethnic German settlers colonizing the lands of Eastern Europe. A perpetual state of hostilities and proxy wars with the Allies in the West would ensue, a tense Cold War of espionage, arms races and ideological conflict akin to the one we knew, but with a triumphant Reich as the dominant superpower rather than the Soviet Union. Worldwide insurgencies and guerrilla groups would form to undermine the Nazi Empire from within its occupied territories and abroad. Germany would engage in relentless propaganda, militarism and indoctrination to solidify a lasting thousand-year Reich under Hitler's dark legacy. The world could be locked in a stalemate between a German-dominated Europe-Eurasia and the shattered Allies for generations to come. Advancements in rocketry, jet technology, and deadlier weapons systems would create a nuclear standoff with missiles aimed between Berlin and the depleted capitals of London and New York. Horrific new technologies of surveillance and totalitarian control would arise in the Reich to monitor and oppress the conquered masses unfortunate enough to be subsumed within its frontiers. The world, and thus Hitler's legacy, would have been completely different had these events come to pass. Within Germany and across conquered territories, Hitler would have been deified as an omnipotent Führer who realized the long-desired goals of Aryan supremacy over a greater Germanic Reich spanning Europe into Russia. His racist ideologies of anti-Semitism, ethnic supremacy, and totalitarian control would become enshrined as a cult of personality and state philosophy. The Nazi propaganda machine would work tirelessly to reshape history, downplaying or denying atrocities like the Holocaust while glorifying Germany's military victories. Hitler's book Mein Kampf would become a revered text and his image ubiquitous through statues, regalia, and civic ceremonies, venerating him as the pivotal figure who fulfilled dreams of German dominance. In the East, the systematic genocide, exploitation, and enslavement of Slavic populations to make room for German settler colonists on those conquered lands would go unchecked. Dissent would be met with brutal oppression and execution. Across the subjugated territories, Hitler would rule through genocide, intimidation, and replacement of ethnic identities with a nationalistic pagan cult mindset. On the global stage, Hitler's legacy would be more complex. Despised as a bloodthirsty conqueror by the defeated Allied nations, yet begrudgingly respected by some for his sheer military ambition and capability to brutally remake the 20th century world order in the image of fascist ethno-nationalism through sheer force. He would remain the permanently stamped face of hateful autocratic ideologies, weaponizing patriotism into destructive ultranationalism and racial supremacy. While this nightmare scenario of Nazi triumph did not come to pass in our timeline, it serves as a sobering reminder of why Hitler's evil vision for conquest and racial supremacy had to be fought and defeated through immense courage and sacrifice. The success of the Allied cause in World War II preserved human liberty, democracy, and dignity from the twisted ambitions of Nazism's final solution. The eventuality of Hitler achieving total domination of the European continent and subjugating the rest of the world to his fascist Weltanschauung was simply too dark to accept.